through the IHH. And they gave that money, and we were able to get yet another ship for our mission. And of course, for Gaza, we had gotten one cargo ship and 2 passenger ships. So we had our flotilla. And we set off in May, and I don't know if I have to tell anybody here, but it was all over the news, of course. May 31st, early morning hours, our ships were attacked. All of our ships. Although most of the news has focused on the Navi Marmara, the big Turkish ship, which had about 600 people on board, all of our ships were boarded and attacked by Israeli soldiers. Now, a lot of videos come out, a lot of pictures have come out about what happened on the ship, a lot of stories have come out about what happened on the ship. What we need to remember first and foremost is that according to international law, a ship that is attacked in international waters, and it doesn't matter who it's attacked by, that ship and the people on the ship have a right to defend themselves. That's first. So, that said, we nonetheless practice nonviolence, and we talked about this. We trained a lot of the people, all the people basically on board the ships. Now, some people have more training than others. Some people have been doing this for a while and have more experience than others. But everybody on the ships was trained and prepared for what might eventually happen. And let me also say at this point that, because I know this is a concern that a lot of people have, is that people entered into this thinking that, it's going to be safe, it's just a cruise to Gaza. No, everybody knew ahead of time what the risks could involve. And as Free Gaza, and with our partners, we made an assessment of all the various scenarios that could happen, including the one that did happen. We didn't think it was necessarily very likely that the Israelis would use lethal force against the people on board, especially in such close range. But it was definitely a scenario that was talked about. It could happen. After all, in the international solidarity movement and the work that we've done in the West Bank and Gaza previously, we've lost some of our members who've been killed by the Israeli military. Rachel Corey, young American student, was crushed by a bulldozer. Tom Herndal, young British citizen, shot in the head by an Israeli sniper who later did time in jail for killing him. More recently, Tristan Anderson, an American shot in the head at close range by a high caliber tear gas canister, causing brain damage. And then, after the flotilla, the day after the flotilla, Emily Hinoshowitz, a young American New York art student, again, also with a tear gas canister, multiple tear gas canisters fired at her, one at her head, lost her left eye as a result of being struck in the head. And of course, we've seen our Palestinian friends killed in front of us for standing with us protesting. So we know the risks involved, and we told everybody was prepared for what might be the kind of response we could get. In the end, 9 were killed on the ships. All Turkish citizens, one a dual American Turkish citizen. Most of them family men. All the victims were men. Dozens injured, and then injured in various ways. Some were injured from bullets. Some were injured from being beaten physically with guns and sticks and things like that. Others not beaten or injured on the ships, but afterwards, after they were taken off the ships into the detention facilities. My wife, Bueda, was on one of the other ships. On the ship, she had her head slammed into the ground repeatedly by an Israeli soldier for simply trying to make sure that our other colleagues on the ship could continue filming what was happening. She just stood in front of them. So later, when she got into the detention facility, she was hit, and then even as they took her to release her in the middle of nowhere, as they were dragging her out of the police vehicle, an officer took an elbow and threw it up into her face. And if you look at, anybody's seen it, I actually didn't see it right away, and I saw it on YouTube, a BBC interview with her, you can see that the day after, she had a black eye. Other of our activists were similarly physically abused, but in some ways, not necessarily worse, but alongside, almost all of our activists had something stolen from them. Initially, the Israeli military said it was confiscating all of our cameras our telephones, any electronic equipment to review it, and would give it back. Well, weeks and weeks have gone by, and this stuff hasn't been returned. And then just 2 weeks ago, we discovered from an Israeli police report, reproduced in an Israeli newspaper, that the soldiers who were charged with keeping, securing the vessels in the port and making sure that all of the goods, the items that were on board were secure, those soldiers were actually selling the computers to fellow soldiers in what became kind of the internal black market in the Israeli military. Now, as far as I know, 2 soldiers so far have been convicted and have been charged and convicted with I don't know what the exact charges, but basically criminal activity, and an officer is under investigation. 2 of our activists, at least, had their credit cards used while they were in detention. This is not a new pattern. The Goldstone report actually details the same thing happening to Palestinians from Gaza who, when their homes were invaded by Israeli soldiers, had their credit cards stolen and later were charged up in places like Tel Aviv and Haifa. This is not to demonize, but to simply say this is what's going on. This is what's happening. All of this language and rhetoric about security masks a reality that has nothing to do with security. With the flotilla, the situation changed. The situation changed drastically. First of all, unlike previous times, this event got major international coverage around the world. There wasn't a media outlet that didn't cover this story in one way or another. There wasn't a media outlet that this time didn't only present the Israeli version or give the Israeli spokespeople their opportunity to speak. This time they also gave us the opportunity to speak and present what happened from our perspective. And not only talk about what happened on the flotilla itself, which we could expect after an event like this that the flotilla incident would get covered. But what was truly remarkable after this time was that as the days passed and the story about what actually happened on the boats became kind of old news, the media kept up the coverage and turned its focus to what was happening in Gaza, to the siege, to the blockade, to the logic of the whole policy in the first place. And what we saw, because of the media attention and focusing a spotlight on it, was that all of a sudden, what had previously gone by completely unremarked, if you look at the news coverage from 2006